Andreas Rentsch is a photography professor at Lycoming College. His work explores the intersection of fate, geography, and politics. He's deeply influenced by his upbringing in a prison compound where his father was the warden. His photographs are featured in major museum collections, including the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston and the Musée de la Photographie in Belgium. Today, on the Crit House, Andreas Rentsch talks about his myFIVE images from Ralph Gibson, Alex Webb, Robert Blake, Christian Lichtenberg, and pictographs from Sago Canyon.
Andreas Rentsch, it is an honor to have you on the program. So we met. I'm gonna like pat myself on the back because you were you curated a show on Long Island at the Photo Gallery, and you selected one of my images as one of the awardees, I guess, for that. So I immediately liked you because of that. But thank you for coming onto the program. It's good to have you here.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, tell us about your fine art career. So tell us, and the art, like, what's your work about, and what's it like, and what are your motivations there?
So, you know, I was always interested in sort of pushing the boundaries of a photographic medium. I'm sort of quite a restless photographer. Once I know how to do something, I wanted to discover something new. And so I get bored very quickly. So when I look at my work, almost every series that I've done the last 30 years, there was always quite a different approach to it. I have used myself in my work for the past 30 years. And so in most series, not in all, who am I as a photographer is maybe a little bit the difficult question to answer, because over, the past 30 years, I have done so many different things. I started initially as a documentary photographer. That's how I started when I was in photo school. Slowly and surely, I sort of drifted into conceptual work and especially experimental work. So my work of late possesses a close aesthetic relationship to painting, drawing, performance art. My aim is always to stay within the parameters of a photographic medium. So when I have a new idea, I always think about how can I translate and reproduce that photographically. So if you give me a piece of paper and a pencil, it would look very contrived, but photographically, somehow I'm wired that way. No, I just think it keeps me also young. It keeps me alive with a medium, and I think to me that's very important. That we don't start repeating ourselves constantly, and that's obviously happens a lot, that we're successful with something and we just do the same thing over and over. And
so here's you had this assignment, 5 images,
Yes.
to decide that are influential to you. Is there a through line? Is there something that's consistent, or what was your thought process of putting those images together?
So it was difficult because I mostly chose especially the first 3 people who have been instrumental in sort of rewiring my way of thinking about photography. And then everything else sort of starts happening. And then, Alex Webb is just somebody I just admire. It's not necessarily what I do anymore. It's just somebody, every time I see his work, I'm just like, this guy is just incredible. And I still love to look at all kinds of photography. It's not because I do, my kind of photography now that I don't look at, traditional or documentary photography. I look at all kinds of photography, and Alex Webb was always somebody I just admire.
I have to say, I have been communicating with Alex to try to get him on to have this conversation, and Rebecca as well, because I think I love her work too. But Alex, if you're watching, love to have you on the program. So let's take a look at your 5 images.
Yes.
Your first image is with Christian Lichtenberg. Tell us about this.
My time with Christian Lichtenberg was very, very important in the trajectory of my career. So, I did this photo school in Switzerland. It was a 4-year school. And the third year, we had to do an apprenticeship with a professional photographer. Up to then, my work was very much documentary in style. So, the people who taught me everything was Henri Cartier-Bresson, Kudelka,
Yeah.
Bruce
Yeah.
Davidson, and
Listen.
hours at the work, how they cropped, what they included, how they excluded, just composition, lighting, everything. And I was intrigued by Christian's work because he was so different. He was staging his photographs. He was not like the documentary photographer that I knew, that basically made sense what was in front of them. So he was staging his photographs, rearranging and interpreting, everything. Christian Lichtenberg taught me that it's not about, the technical savvy that makes a good photograph. His work was quite grainy, and he was very influenced by Eastern philosophy.
Hmm.
And so one thing that he told me that never left me, and to me is something that stayed with me all these years, is make the invisible visible. I was always like, what does that mean now? But, the more I thought about it, it's often important things are below the surface. We have to go discover them. We need sort of a visual vocabulary to discover them. So if we don't have that vocabulary, we will never get there, no? Um, Metaphors, symbols, and all that.
Let's move on to your number 2 image with Ralph Gibson, or
So
images, plural, I guess.
he's mostly known through his books. You know, Books are for him the ultimate sort of art to display his work. He created even his own book company, Lustrum, in order, to have full control over his imagery. What I liked about this work, again, it's very stark, it's very raw, it's very grainy when you see an actual image. He often reduces his images to just few components. There's usually not that much in his image, but it's very graphic, very high contrast. I have several of his books, and one book is called Syntax. And since we understand under syntax the arrangement of words and phrases to communicate with through language. And what he does, and I like that title, because what he does, he communicates with images, but he communicates with images by pairing them. When you, for example, look at this two images right here, you look just at the image on the right, you could think it's a woman now, probably at the beach. Maybe it's a beach scene. By introducing the image on the left, that context and that narrative dramatically changes.
Yeah.
That fascinates me, that he forces us to look at imagery and make sense of images that he probably took on different photo shoots, probably on different years. And and also that power of a book. I think a book is so effective because you have no choice than to turn the page, and then you have to deal with the next page, and then you have to deal again with two sort of disparate images that maybe initially don't really make sense, and now you have to start making sense if you want to. Like, he always says that I'm not explaining my work. Either you get it or you don't,
Yeah.
or you want to get it and you try, or you don't. And I want to read you a quote: that I'm not terribly drawn towards the epic event. I'd like to make something totally insignificant into an object of importance by virtue of how photography works. And I like that quote. And I I often say, we have to make the ordinary look extraordinary. You don't have to travel. Everything is right in front of us. It's just how you look at it, how you interpret it.
Your third image from Robert Blake.
So Robert Blake was the chair of the General Studies program at the International Center of Photography. So he was my teacher, and he also became my mentor. One day he showed this, he's working in class. And so this is work from his Legend series. I always call it just the red piece. To me, it was totally mesmerizing, and When he explained that this image is actually of a beach in southern France, I was totally floored. Basically just put a red filter in front of his lens. No, that's all he did. Transformed this photo from a very ordinary sort of beach photo into an otherworldly, foreboding, almost apocalyptic,
Yeah.
sensation.
Yeah.
So this image taught me it's not about what you're photographing, but how we perceive and interpret things. It opened a whole new world of seeing for me, and introduced me to a visual language that I wasn't yet familiar. And so it was a very, very inspirational piece. I'm interested in how someone's mind rearranges and perceives and interprets the world in front of us. A painter has a blank canvas, no?
Yeah.
And have to make sense and draw something. We have the whole world in front of us and we have to make sense of it. So I'm very interested in what you include, but equally important, what you exclude as well. I'm drawn to this experience and ambiguity of seeing and seeing things, how these photographers see things differently, where they push the boundaries, where maybe a traditional beach scene becomes something very otherworldly. And to me, that's the fascinating part of art and photography.
And there's Alex Webb. Alex, it'll be great to have you on the program when you come on. Talk about this image.
So basically, also a little bit what I talked about, Robert's piece also applies a little bit to Alex Webb. Maybe this image is a little bit different from the other ones that are in my fives. But I look at a lot of photography. I said that I think before, and his work just is always mind-blowing to me. Like Lee Freelander, like Henri Cartier-Bresson, within a split second, they make this very intricate composition of some quite chaotic environment in front of them. And all these decisions making and pressing the shutter at the right time, having everything ready and having it so perfectly arranged. To me, it's just a hallmark of incredible photographers with an extremely sophisticated sense of aesthetic. To me, this is almost like an image that is staged. I mean, how can you do it so perfectly?
Yeah.
He works for Magnum, or I don't know if he still does, but he was a Magnum photographer. But his work was always different than most Magnum photographers because his work is more about color. I think he's one of the greatest color photographer I know.
Yeah.
Color to me was always very, very difficult because it adds a layer to it. And often color can be more distracting than actually adding.
Yep.
So he has an incredible sense of color. He has an incredible sense of shapes. He has an incredible sense of composition. For example, this image, why is this person, sort of hiding his face? Is he hiding from the photographer? It's also so surreal. It's just incredible how he sees and how he makes these quick decisions. And I don't know, he's just such a pleasure and such a great artist.
So you're going a different direction and back thousands of years with this next piece of work. I've listed it as anonymous just because we don't know who created the image. But tell us about the influence of this.
So as early in my actually sort of at 10-year-old, my godmother gave me a book about Red Cloud, who was a very famous native chief of a Sioux tribe. And I became very fascinated and I read a lot of books of Geronimo, Sitting Bull, all these great chiefs of native tribes here in the United States. So when I came first to the United States, my itinerary was a lot following some of these places that I read in the books, like the Black Hills, Wounded Knee, Little Bighorn, where, there was a big battle and so on. And then I came also across American Southwest. I was fascinated by the desert for between 1990 and 2004. Every year, I went back to the Southwest once or twice for several weeks to do my work. If you look very carefully, you cannot avoid seeing all these pictographs and petroglyphs. So pictographs are, they use pigments to draw on the walls, and petroglyphs, they're carved into the rocks.
Yeah.
And they're ubiquitous. I mean, there's thousands out there. What is their meaning? We don't really know. To me, they were just magical. I love just the lines. Are they spiritual beings? Are they religious rituals? We don't really know, but I was just fascinated. I constantly looked at them, and I constantly went out and looked for them. You know, I sort of knew where most likely you could find them. And then I sent you two pictures, you know, of the Great Wall in Horseshoe Canyon, and you know, they're incredible artwork. So I also like the artistic aspect of it. And when we look at some of these images, you know, it reminds me of some Jean-Michel Basquiat paintings. Was he influenced by them? I don't know, probably not. To me, they were also extremely artistic. The other thing that sort of fascinated me about these is, you know, today we communicate mostly with photographs through Instagram, Snapchat, and so on, no? But that innate sort of desire to communicate with images dates back thousands of years. So
Yes.
this panel that you see here is believed to be 2,000 years old. And some of these petroglyphs and pictographs I've saw, you know, are maybe 6,000 years old. And so it's fascinating that even then they want to communicate with imagery, and they used the only medium that they had available, which is rock paintings.
Well, Andreas Rentsch, it is great having you on the program and listening to your influences. What a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. That was fun. That was a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
it was. And it was a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you. And thank you all for watching The Crit House.